Sun and Mood Reads.
Hello everyone, my name is Sun. Welcome to Sun and Mood Reads. I have a bit of a change of location today. This is my 4-year-old's room. My husband, who works from home at the moment, has conference calls all day. I don't have much time on the weekend to do any videos, so this was the best place for it, and I don't mind it. The lighting's quite nice. A bit special actually, and look, I'm surrounded by chubby dolls and stuff, and yeah, not creepy at all. Anyway, this is going to be my general overview October wrap-up video. Originally, I wasn't going to do this wrap-up video because I did separate reviews on the 3 top reads in October for me. But then I thought the other 3 books that I read, they definitely need an honourable mention. Even the 1 book that I DNF'd is definitely worth discussing. So here I am, I've got a half-hour slot before I go and pick up my girls. Let's do this. Okay, so the first book that I read in October was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Or is it Maurier? Because I started watching reviews after I read Rebecca and everyone is saying Daphne du Maurier. So, and I've just been saying Daphne du Maurier. I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm not really going to go into this book because I did a whole separate review. You can check it out on the link below. It's quite detailed. I went for about 15 minutes, probably 7 minutes too long, but I loved it and had quite a few things to say about it. So yeah, you can check it out there. The second book that I read, I also did a separate review. Check out the link below. It is The Wife and the Widow by Christian White, an Aussie author. It's his second book. He's all about crime, mystery, thriller. I'm not going to go into it except to say that it is my mission to get Christian White out there because he should be up there with the Gillian Flynns, with the Ruth Wares. I'm getting all evangelical about him. So please, please check out Christian White, The Nowhere Child, and The Wife and the Widow. The third book that I read in October, I also did a separate review for this. It is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This was the one that I was most excited about. Absolutely loved it, has become a new favourite, cannot wait to continue with the series, but you can check out my absolute gush review in the descriptions below. Alright, let's move on to the 4th book that I read. Okay, so confession time. So I said a little lie in my previous video. I think it was my October TBR video. I basically said that I had finished reading The Obelisk Gate, which is the 2nd book of the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, and that I was going to move on to Stone Sky, which is the 3rd book, the 3rd and final book. So that was a bit of a lie. I only read about 50% of Obelisk Gate. I honestly just thought by the time I filmed and published that particular video, I would have finished reading it. But I had not, because after I published it, I got distracted by shinier things. So I learnt a big lesson there. Do not lie on public media platforms such as YouTube. So yes, I finished reading The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin, the 1st book being the 5th season. I absolutely loved it and I'm really, really enjoying going through this trilogy because this series was a game changer for me. It was my very, very first fantasy read ever. So I have so many things to say and I'm saving it all up, filing it, and I have every intention to do a separate review of the Broken Earth trilogy. So I'm saving most of my thoughts for that. But what I will say is I absolutely loved the 2nd book, just like I loved the 1st book. It was, though, a very different reading experience for me this time round. Now, N.K. Jemisin, you may know if you've read, has a very unique writing style. In the Broken Earth trilogy, the narrator narrates in the 2nd person. So you are doing this now, you are doing that. And Jemisin also has this almost kind of wry, ironic tone. I heard that for many readers it takes a while to get used to her tone. But I remember when I read the 5th season, and this was about 3 years ago now, I took to her writing straight away. Like, I got it and I loved it. Just before I continue on about her writing, I should probably give you a very, very quick general summary if you're not familiar with the series. So this series is a mix of fantasy and sci-fi. The setting is in a continent called the Stillness, where it's periodically hit with apocalyptic-sized natural disasters. These are called seasons, and these seasons wipe out generations and basically reshape civilization again. There are some amazing world building and fantasy elements in this story. There is a race called the Origins, and they can control Earth's energy, particularly from the ground. So like they can manipulate, amplify, calm seismic activity, for instance. And this race, and I guess the story as a whole, is a symbolic exploration of our world's history of systemic racism and oppression, and how this causes trauma and fragmentation, I guess, in individuals and society, and has for generations and will for generations to come. So this storytelling is quite profound. The world is unlike anything I've ever read about. Very, very vivid, quite raw, quite confronting, diverse, unique, ambiguous characters that you're not quite sure whether you like or not, but you understand them, you get to know them really well. What I love most of all is that the protagonist is a middle-aged, flawed mother. Like, hell yeah, I want to read more of that. If anyone knows of any other, preferably fantasy books, where the protagonist is a middle-aged woman or a mum or whatever, just, yeah, please let me know, because I dug that. But anyway, going back to the writing style, yeah, for some reason, and I don't know if it's because it's been a few years since reading the first book, the 5th season, and then moving on to the second book, but this time around it did take me longer to get used to N.K. Jemisin's writing again. That added on to just the whole world and the magic systems and the science of everything itself, just re-familiarizing with all that as well. So I think it was a combination of all those things. It did take me a while to settle in again, but even when I did settle into the story, I did notice that I was reading the story more like I was on the outside looking in, rather than being completely immersed in the story like I was in the first book. And I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing at all, because I was still completely intrigued, mind-blowing, literally out of this world concepts, and I am curious as hell as to how this all ends. I enjoyed it. It was just a very different experience. And I think with the first book, I was riding on the surprise of, wow, I've never read anything like this before. Do you know what I mean? So maybe the emotions and novelty of that has worn off. I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy it at all. Like I did love it. It was just a very different experience. I was a bit more detached, like looking from outside in and appreciating it. But anyway, stay tuned for my review of the whole trilogy once I finish the third book. And I promise I won't lie again ever about having read any book, really. Okay, so let's move on to the 5th book that I read. It was Beach Read by Emily Henry. I chose to read this book because I needed a book that was a palate cleanser for the month. I had heard about this book, it was getting a lot of exposure, a lot of promotion, but I hadn't watched or read anything in detail about the book. I just kept coming across it, so I thought, you know, Beach Read. That sounds like a great, light, romantic, contemporary read. I'm ready for that now. Let's read it. And if I may, I'm just going to use food as an analogy for reading. But for the month of October, I had had my share of veggies and my healthy foods, which is, you know, my literary fiction, my classics. I had a portion of my favorite foods and also discovered a new cuisine that I absolutely love. And so that was Assassin's Apprentice. My favorite foods was The Wife and the Widow. So I just needed a book that was my burgers and fries, you know what I mean? My junk food. That was going to be quick and delicious. It's not something that I can have all the time, but I appreciate it when I do. And that is, of course, my contemporary romance fictions. A quick, witty, romantic kind of read, you know? So basically, I went in expecting burgers and fries, and it wasn't quite what I expected. I mean, it definitely was burgers and fries, but then it was almost like with a bit of like spinach in the middle, or I bit into the burger and then I was like chewing on it, and then I realized, oh, I think this is a plant-based burger made with azuki beans or something, but it's still deep fried, so I don't really mind it, I guess. You know what I mean? So yeah, it did have a lot of the elements and structures and tropes of a contemporary romance fiction, but there were other levels to it. It was a little bit, it went deeper. So yeah, generally I did enjoy it. And it was a wonderful surprise to realize it was a deeper read than what I gave credit for. So this story is a bit of a rivalry to love kind of trope story between two writers. January is a contemporary romance writer and Gus is a literary fiction writer. And then you've got the big old coincidence of them ending up living next door to each other, you know, in a beach town. What I really loved about this book and was such a nice surprise was the commentary Emily Henry was making about our perception of what is contemporary fiction, what is contemporary women's fiction, why that needs to be specified. And obviously it's a discussion, an issue that January, the character, but also, you know, real life authors go through all the time. January makes a point that, you know, if she switched all the Jessicas to Johns in her story, it would change from women's fiction to just fiction. And why is that, you know? The very action of me picking this book up with my presumptions about, oh, it's going to be a light, romantic chick lit, you know, I think that just proves the point, right? So yeah, I loved the discussion and exploration of that. The romance, the relationship between January and Gus, yeah, it was satisfying. I liked the chemistry. I didn't love it though. I wasn't just like totally rooting for them. I don't know why, but just probably a personal taste. I don't know. And within their relationship, there is more of a complex exploration of, you know, how trauma or events in your upbringing can affect our adult relationships. But I must say there was a point in the book, and I think it was about 70% of the way in. For me, it just became a little bit too much of a therapy slog, if you know what I mean. I just felt like it was going round in circles a little bit, just like, you know, the things that they were kind of working their way through emotionally, psychologically. I appreciated it, but yeah, I don't know. It could have been, like I said, I was expecting to switch my brain off, but I couldn't because I wanted to read this and appreciate it fully. So all in all, it was a fantastic read. I did love it. It just wasn't what I was expecting. Maybe I should have looked at reviews more. I don't know. I just wanted macas, but what I got was a macro burger with sweet potato fries, which sounds good though, but look, I'm going around in circles now. It's just making me hungry, so let's move on. But actually, food is a good segue into the last book that I read for the month of October. It was actually a non-fiction book. It's called The F-It Diet by Caroline Dooner. I don't want to drop the F-bomb. I drop it all the time in real life, but I just don't want to do it on YouTube because I do work with kids in my career, so I don't know. I'm just going to play it safe. But anyway, F-It Diet by Caroline Dooner. So I have a bit of a go-to comfort read when it comes to non-fiction books, and it's the same comforting feel I imagine others feel when they read like travel or food memoirs. For me, it's undiet books. And what I mean by undiet books, it's books that go against dieting, against, you know, restrictive lifestyles, against, you know, that wolf in sheep's clothing that always, you know, those books that always say this isn't really a diet, but then it really is. Or this is actually intuitive, mindful eating, but it really isn't. It's more portion control and, you know, it's just a form of dieting. So once in a while, I do find one that's innately an undiet book, that it's all about getting back to just loving and accepting who you are and promotes just getting back into just intuitive eating in the most simplistic and human way. But yeah, there's something kind of comforting about that for me. Yeah, sometimes I just need to read about that and remind myself of that in order for that to be not important in my life, if that makes sense. So anyway, I came across this book. It's probably one of the best books I've read when it comes to this genre. I really connected with her story and how she came to live out her lifestyle mantra and her beliefs. Caroline, like me, was from a drama, acting, performing background. Went to a very prestigious drama academy, was put under a lot of pressure to look a particular way, keep your weight to a minimum. Image was just everything, you know, because you are preparing yourself for a career in front of the camera, on screen, You know, you're using your body, you are exposing yourself, being vulnerable in every type of way. That struggle of self-worth, body image, all those things do kind of cross paths in that industry. So I really related to a lot of the author's experiences. Apologies everyone for this abrupt change in location. My daughter came home and she cracked the shits basically because I was in her room and she didn't want me in there and used her favourite word of the month, privacy. And usually I would, you know, override it, but look, it's Friday, I'm tired, I'm choosing my battles, and I thought, look, this will be a good excuse to get outside in the garden, the sun is shining, it'll be nice and peaceful. But then, of course, every man and his dog decided to mow their bloody lawns, so there's just a lot of noise and drone outside, so just sorry about that, but I need to finish this off. On a positive note though, it's wine o'clock. Cheers. So every once in a while, I do seek comfort by reading these books. These undiet books are a reminder for me to just focus on something like focus on things that matter. And I must admit, it's easier to do that as you get older, I think. Well, it is for me. I have been able to grow as a person, become more confident with myself, become more loving to myself. And I think those things happened when I became a mum, basically. And I think that leads to another point. You know, I want to pass on these lessons to my daughters, you know, these lessons about having self-worth and having a healthy and balanced relationship with food and materialism. I want to pass these lessons on, not by just talking about it. I want to embody it. You know, I want to practice what I preach, basically. Anyway, that's why I appreciated this book. This book really asks you to explore the belief that though you may never reach your ideal goal of what is a perfect body, you can definitely reach an ideal goal of what it is to be perfectly happy. And the other thing I love about this book is that Caroline, the author, dedicates this book to cheese. She says, "To cheese, I'll never forsake you again." Okay, moving on to the last book that I unfortunately DNF'd. And by the way, DNF is did not finish. Look, I am not going to presume that everyone on YouTube knows what the acronym DNF stands for. I did not know 3 months ago when I started BookTube. I felt a bit silly to ask. I had to, like, you know, obviously Google it. But anyway, I did not finish The Other Bennett Sister by Janice Hadlow. I know, oh my God, I'm upset because I'm not in the club of all the readers that love this book. And I really tried to finish it, but I decided against it because it wasn't for me, and I was at peace with it because I realized there is a type of book, a subgenre that I don't think I am into. I think it's Jane Austen retells that are set within the Austen period, within the Regency period. I don't think I mind modern retells. I read Aisha at Last a couple of months ago and I love that. I felt when I was reading The Other Bennett Sister, I loved the premise. I loved that it was through the eyes of Mary Bennett. That made me very, very intrigued, but I just found I couldn't really get into it and just really enjoy the premise because that was really the only thing I was hanging on to. The writing didn't really grab me at all. You know, I just couldn't help thinking as I was reading it, it's not Austen. You know, Austen hasn't written this, although it's Austen's characters. The writing lacked wit, it lacked that kind of wink wink, this character is saying this, but really what are they saying? Let's pull the cover. You know, those connotations. I was just missing the clever. But it was a great reading experience for me because for me it solidified how much I love Austen and how much of a genius she is. I think the closer it is to Austen, the more I'm going to dislike it, a retell. So I might let that subgenre go for now. But what I think I will do is and something that I've wanted to do for a while is try a little bit of historical romance. Georgette Heyer is an author that's been on my radar. She writes within the period of the Regency era. Yeah, I just keep hearing that they're just really delightful reads. I know that it's not trying to be Austen, and I did actually read the first couple of chapters of Venetia, I think it was, and I really loved the writing. It was there's a bit of cheek to it, kind of bubbliness and a wit to it. So yeah, I think I'm going to give that a go. But yeah, any kind of retells that are set within the same era, I immediately compare it with Austen, and there's no one like her, there really isn't. Oh right, I hope I didn't show it, but I'm just so frustrated at all these lawnmowers and whippersnippers going off. It's just one of those Fridays. Oh, and look, great, there's a couple of insects that have decided to go for a swim in my red wine. I'm just gonna try to scoop these insects out. There we go. Cheers. Alright, thank you so much for joining me. Let me know what you think of my wrap up, and please check out my individual reviews on Rebecca, The Wife and the Widow, and Assassin's Apprentice. I'm Sun, this is Sun and Mood Reads, and I will see you next time.
Sun and Mood.